Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this episode of the Pave It Forward Podcast. My name is Phil Metzger, and with me is Kevin Gray, and we are here to help leaders in the paving industry who are looking to run more efficiently, meet their ideal customer, and improve the lives of those around them through meaningful work. Kevin, how are you today, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm good. We had a great week out there in the field. I've got a Friday here to get caught up and plan and prepare again for another busy week next week. So all cylinders are firing, man. It's starting to feel like a real business again. So
Absolutely.
I'm having fun, man.
I hear you. Yeah, and I
You all
feel
right?
yeah, I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm always excited about business. And the excitement is still there, but I can tell it's Friday as well. Some circuits are starting to spark a little bit.
Yeah.
The words are starting to get tangled a little bit. But
Right.
man, it's been a great week, and of course, I'm always excited to sit here and talk business with you.
That's
And
awesome.
it's been nice seeing the response over the last couple episodes of some of the topics we've been coming up with. We discussed prior to this episode how we try to make a lot of these episodes action based.
Yeah.
Not get too far into the philosophical stuff, or at least not too often, but really at least have topics to where people who are listening can leave with some actionable advice. And so, kind of piggybacking off the scope of work that we talked about last time, we wanted to discuss being a good foreman on an asphalt paving site. This is obviously, perhaps, if not perhaps the most key role on site, just as far as keeping everything organized and just kind of running the show. So you have plenty of experience on this. I know you've, as both the foreman and a subcontractor, and in quite a few different roles. Actually, now that I think about it, pretty much every role in asphalt paving having to do with a commercial project. But do you have any tips? Do you have any kind of defining characteristics about what being a foreman is on site? And I guess first we'll just start off with what are the key responsibilities of a foreman, and what does it kind of mean to you to be a foreman?
Um, Man, yeah. I mean that person in the organization is critical because they're taking, what they've got to do is meld together, the information that the customer and the sales team have created as far as a scope and what they're looking to achieve in a project, and successfully relaying that to the crew of men and women who may be out there in the field executing the work. So, I mean, they're very pivotal. Yeah, it's Friday. We're having trouble talking here.
There you go.
Pivotal. Wow, pivotal person. I
You're
think is
being
the
very
double
pivotal
P.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm being very pivotal right now. They are a very pivotal person in the organization because they are in some extent, the middleman, like I said, between sales and the scoping side, the project management side, and then the crew in the field. And the ultimate goal um, is ensuring that the work is done safely, that everybody goes home to their families, to their kids, to their significant others, to their parents, whatever, at the end of the day. And then, getting things done on time, within budget, and making sure that the quality and the standards are knocked out of the park. And then another piece they have to tackle, because every job site is different, every day is different, the weather's different, uh, mechanical issues, trucks are lagging behind, whatever. I mean, there's variables that present themselves every single day, every single job. They just happen. So they've got to be very capable of adapting on the fly and being able to keep the production train moving and the quality, standard as high as possible. So it's a very you've got to be able to be proactive as well as reactive, when you're out there in the field. And the way I look at a foreman for a paving crew is and as well, as any kind of leader within the company, but that foreman, I mean, they got to be a coach. I can relate it to sports. I mean, you're kind of leading the team. You've got all kinds of different personalities out there. You've got all different kind of skill levels out there on the field with you, and you've got to be able to make all that work in harmony. And you've got to be the example. You got to be willing to teach. You got to be willing to coach. You got to have a lot of patience. Sometimes you got to have a lot of tolerance. because especially right now, and it's happened a lot as we grew the other company, you bring in folks with that don't have a lot of experience or don't have a lot of repetitions or knowledge or experience, and you got to take the time to be patient with them and teach them and help them understand what it is exactly that you're after and what you're looking for and what the quality standards that are expected. That we've got a product. At the end of the day, we have a product and a promise that we need to deliver to this customer. So it's getting all of those things done by any means necessary and keeping your cool about you during the whole process, man.
Sounds like a monumental position in the
It
company.
is. It is
Uh,
a big position, man.
yeah, I don't know of it, perhaps any other position that's more essential to customer satisfaction. It sounds like, which is honestly sounds really difficult because you're not only managing the crew, the individuals on your crew, you're managing the actual situation of the project that's going on, and you're in communication with the person on site who is representing,
Yeah.
the property who you're on.
Yeah, because not all the time there's, depending on the size of your company, the salesperson or the project manager or even the superintendent is going to be out there on site all the time, or sometimes not at all.
Mhm.
Sometimes, especially in the smaller companies, it's the sales, it's the office, it's the sales staff, and then it's a foreman and the crew, and there is no real in between the customer and production. So a lot of times that foreman is in direct communication with the customer throughout the process too, if they need to be. If there's just anything arises during the course of the project, they've got to be able to step in and wear that hat too. I mean, uh, it's and it all comes down. I mean, at the end of the day, it all comes down to customer experience. And if you want a crew out there delivering that experience for your customers, you've got to be able to teach, to coach, to show some patience, and be able to help them through. And by the way, like this this is a big one I learned way back when I bought my first company and was the owner and thought I could just run around telling everybody what to do or how we needed to do it, what time we needed to be done, and what it needed to look like. Until I actually put my boots on and got out there with these folks and started understanding what they do and worked myself up from the shovel to operating a paver, whatever, that progression looks like out in the field. I didn't really command any respect from these folks. So that's another thing. If you want to be the leader, you've got to be willing to do what everyone else on that crew has done 1,000 times over. And it doesn't mean you get to sit in your truck in the air conditioner all day and watch these guys and gals put in a hard day's work. If you got to be jump in wherever you're needed, that's what you need to do. That's what you got to do. And
Gotcha.
I think that's a big piece, man.
So I'm curious as to just kind of from, we'll just say the smallest of operations through a large scale capital project to which a company might be running several pavers, several trucks at once. So
Yeah.
on the smaller end of things, I suppose a foreman technically could be one person doing the whole paving job by itself, but on the smaller end, it's one
Yeah.
person looking after the crew of 2 to 4 people, I would presume.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on the larger side, I'm curious if there is an additional rank there. Obviously, there's a site foreman, but if you're running 3 or 4 pavers or something like that on a huge job, a road project, something like that, is there a crew foreman as opposed to a project foreman that is responsible for each of the
Yeah.
pavers, or how
That
might that responsibility be divvied up?
yeah, that typically gets more into like a superintendent kind of role. So that's
Gotcha.
that's someone that would manage. So a superintendent's role is to manage the foreman, and then the foreman's role is to manage the crew. So it's basically, yeah, you're correct. When it starts getting larger, and you've got several crews working, yeah, there gets to be project managers involved. There's superintendents involved, and so it's just kind of rank and file. Because at some point when there gets to be too many folks in or too many crews to manage, like there's got to be someone helping keep all of them in line too. So it's yeah, as the system and the company grows, and evolves and gets bigger, then it's natural that there's more, kind of rank and file that evolves with it. So
Gotcha.
absolutely. Yep.
So I have a question. You had mentioned something about the leadership style that it takes to be willing to do every job out there in order to get the experience needed to not only
Yeah.
know what you're talking about to gain, but to gain the respect of your crew. Is there, maybe we can approach this from the opposite angle. Is there any aspects that you just cannot bring into being a foreman that would destroy your leadership ability? Is there anything that would that you just can't do, or traits you can't have as a foreman if you want to be
Eh,
successful?
Well, I'll tell you one trait I can think of real quick, and it's ego.
Mm,
The way I look at being a foreman or being any kind of leader is you've got to be able to wear the hat and understand beyond a shadow of a doubt that and it's funny because you see people work their way up through companies where they start on a shovel or whatever and work up to a rake, or work up to a screw, or work up to an operator, and then work themselves up to a foreman, and they're like, I've made it to the top. And in turn, for me, what I've figured out and what I understand today is when you make it to the top, you're actually working. Now you work for all those six, seven, eight other men and women out there in the field. It's not the other way around. They don't work for you. You're there to serve them, just as your
yes.
company is there to serve that customer. So you got to put your ego aside. You got to know that you got to be ready and willing for anything that comes your way. And you got to know that you are the person that is responsible for dealing with it,
Mhm.
no matter how big, how small, how important, how unimportant you may think it is. Like at
Wow.
the end of the day, it's your role to wear that hat and be the leader. There's a great deal of responsibility and and humility that comes with being a foreman, with being a leader out there.
That's yeah, it definitely is sounding more and more like it's a special type of person. Um
I
is there
think
any
so.
is there anything from that foreman standpoint that you've noticed that good foremen do to enhance worker productivity? Whether it be any kind of reward system or showing him how it's done or just tips, something that someone does throughout the day that workers really seem to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, rewards are always good, but it's figuring out what rewards mean to each person on the crew. Like
Mm,
some of it sometimes it may be extra money. To someone else, it may be a little more time off with their family. To someone else, it might be just acknowledging that I'm doing a good job for you, boss. Like
mm,
not everyone's going to respond the same way. So it's critically important to get to know and understand the personalities of each and every person out there so you can reward in different kind of ways. And the biggest thing is you got to be open and approachable. You got
mm,
I've seen I don't know how many leaders, foremen I've had over the course of my career, but I've seen it done in a couple, several different ways. The dictatorship style never seems to work like that. Um, can that guy go out there and get a lot of work done in a short amount of time with some pretty good quality? Yeah, but it's very short lived. You're ultimately and eventually going to wear out the attitude. Most importantly, not just physically, but you're going to wear out the attitudes of those that are working for you. So it's someone that's open and approachable, someone that's understanding it. And look, I know this sounds soft, everybody out there in the world of construction, like you got to have this hard ass, you know, no bullshit kind of foreman out there. But and look, there are when it's time to get things done, and yes, it is ultimately his or her job to move the production line and get things done. But you can't just run a dictatorship out there. You got to be willing to lead by example. And by the way, if the example you're setting out there is running around yelling and hollering and screaming and cussing and demanding all day, well, what kind of example is that setting to your crew? What kind of example may that be setting to your customer that's watching you out the window while you're executing the project? I mean, you know, it goes down to the simple golden rule, do unto others as you want to be done unto you. And it's no different whether you're the foreman or the rate guy. Like, have some respect out there, have some decency, have some tolerance. Understand that if you got someone that's not cutting the weight or not, you're not getting a response out of it, it's your job to either train that person better or ultimately maybe make a change or let them go or change a position. Like, and when I talk about being able to be a coach out there, you got 7 or 8 different, personalities. You also got 7 or 8 different skill levels. You got to make sure everybody's in the right seat. You got to make sure everybody's doing something that they're comfortable doing and that they actually want to be doing. I
Hmm.
don't know how many times I've wondered over the years, well, why isn't he getting any better at that, or why isn't he trying harder, or why doesn't he understand? It's like he absolutely hates what he's doing. He's
He
there
hates every
just for
second
a
of it. Yeah.
check, and like
Yeah.
and so you got to be able to have those conversations too. Like it's almost like a parent-child kind of uh, dynamic to some extent. Like, how can I help you? Again, you work for these folks.
Hmm.
They don't work for you. How can I help your experience with our company be better, more rewarding? You know? Uh,
Absolutely. So just to dive into that communication aspect of it, of a foreman position, talking to an employee and understanding what it is that may be motivating them. So if you're noticing something is wrong with one of your employees or something like that, and you know that they're worth it, you make the decision that it's worth spending some time trying to see how you may want to help them. What does that communication look like? Is that typically on you as the business owner? Is it on the foreman? Do you all both talk to him? How do you kind of approach that type of communication with a worker?
I think that kind of goes up the rank a little bit, and at the end of the day, the owner works for everybody.
Hmm.
So that foreman, leader, superintendent, project manager's got to have that kind of comfort level and that kind of relationship and line of communication with the owner if it gets to that point that they know that they can bring an issue and get the same kind of response that I'm sitting here saying that the foreman should have with their crew. Like it can't be any different through that entire chain of command. Like that line of communication, although it needs to be established and there does need to be a rank and file involved, and middle management involved, and then leadership involved. I mean, um, yeah, it's absolute. And like with so many things in life in general, so many times it comes down to just being able to communicate and have a conversation about it and understand where the other person's coming from, or understand what the foreman is expecting of you, or vice
Yeah.
versa, whatever, like
Well,
and
let's
and
let's
some
let's dive into that, man. Let's
yeah.
You've been in the position so many times. I've literally walked in on you in this position so many times. It's a tough industry. You're
Yeah.
constantly having hard conversations with employees. Whether you're taking a literal example or it's just something that you've done it so many times it happens over and over again, when you mentally picture that person coming into the office and you don't know how to communicate to them, what are you thinking going into that conversation?
Well, I mean, back in the day I used to be very nervous because a lot of the times they're conversations that you and or the other person doesn't really want to have. Nobody likes bad news. I don't care if you want to admit it or not, nobody really likes confrontation. Nobody likes being the bad guy. Nobody likes telling hard truths. But man, what I learned after having to do that so many times over the course of my career is that when we can finally break the ice and just start the conversation, come in the office, shut the and a lot of the times it's the atmosphere and where we're having the conversation.
Hmm.
I've noticed a lot of the time when I bring someone into the office, pull the door behind you, Johnny, sit down, let's talk. That gets everybody on guard. Like
Yeah.
I don't care how many times you've done it. Like it's just not that comfortable. So a lot of
Yeah.
the times
Principal's office effect. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
man. Or mom and dad call you up into their room, shut the door. You're in deep shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It something triggers,
Yeah. It's
in
real.
your
I feel it
gut,
right now. We're
right?
just
And yeah,
hypothetical right here. Yeah.
you can feel it hypothetically just talking about it.
Yeah.
So sometimes, what's worked for me in the past is just throwing them in the truck and say, let's go for a ride, or bringing them over to the tailgate on a job site and say, what's going on, man? Like, let's just talk as humans. And look, there's a time and place where you've got to wear the owner hat and you've got to wear the foreman hat and you have to stand your ground. Like there's what you tolerate is, what you allow is basically what you're saying you'll tolerate.
Hmm.
So at some point there are standards, there are policies, there are procedures if you want to run an efficient company. Like you can't just be out there letting everybody get away with whatever the hell they want to get away with because we're this nice company and we have communication and we have conversations and we do the right thing. That's great, and I support that to an extent. But a lot of the times it's just getting them out of that principal office mentality and just going and having a conversation. Take them and get a cup of coffee. Like take them off the job site and go to McDonald's and get a cup of coffee and a breakfast burrito for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Whatever. Like if it needs to be done, figure out a way to get it done without it having to be too rigid or too impersonal or too strict. Like
absolutely.
let the barriers come down a little bit.
So, as I said, you've been in all of these positions.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about it from the owner communicating with the foreman.
Yeah.
You've been in several positions, as you said, with many different styles, mentalities, and systems and histories. Personalities, all these different things with managing
Man.
foremen.
Yeah.
And as at some points you're managing multiple foremen, especially when you have your own trucking and all these different divisions, a seal coat division, and all these different things. So maybe you have someone that's a newer foreman, or maybe you have someone that's an older foreman. What advice can you kind of give about that kind of approach? Maybe we'll just stick with the new one. Maybe there's a rookie that comes in, wants to be a foreman. You said a lot of times they get in that position and they figure they've made it, and they haven't realized that now they're actually working for the other people.
Yeah.
What are some of those conversations like that you have with a new foreman that may be willing to accept a little guidance?
Well, and it's look, when we move from laborer operator to foreman position, like that again, it comes down to communication and expectations. Like
Mm,
that deserve is deserving of a very transparent and honest conversation of what the expectation is going to be and what it's
mm,
going to look like and what's going to be demanded of them and what new roles and responsibilities they're going to have to be accountable for and kind of put it back on them and I mean even what I've learned you kind of even oversell how challenging it's going to be and then ask that person like is that something you're sure you want are you ready for, and just put it out there.
yeah.
And a lot of the times you can get that gut feeling. A lot of the times this person, even a new foreman, they've probably been around the company for at least a season, maybe even two. And you've got a pretty good grasp of who this person is and what they're capable of and what they are or not going to be willing to do. But a lot of the times when you approach somebody with that foreman title, they're going to blow as much smoke up your ass as they can
Mm,
just to get that title and get the truck and get the raise and get, you know, again, yeah, it goes back to ego. So, are you dealing with someone? And I
absolutely.
had some of my best foremen for a period where people we brought up through the ranks and for a year or two were amazing. And then that ego piece started getting them. And look, I'm not sure and maybe I didn't know how to guide them or better direct them as a leader after they got a year or two into it and maybe got comfortable. Maybe at that point, because at the end of the day, everything comes down to the leadership. If the crew's failing, it's the foreman's fault. If the foreman's failing, it's probably the owner's fault. So
Yeah.
did I do a good enough job of stepping back in maybe at year one or two when I started to see the patterns and maybe and now that I'm reflecting on it, it's like I probably came too much like a dictatorship and saying you've been doing this for a year or two, you've been around the company 5 years, like what the expectation is. Why aren't you doing your damn job? And
Mhm.
and it's like maybe I didn't handle that aspect of the owner's leadership role correctly with some of those that did fail as foreman within my own organization. So it's um, what goes for the lowest man on the totem pole is the same that goes for the highest man on the totem pole. And if that's what we preach and that's what we say we're going to practice, then it needs to happen all the way through the rank and file. And it's no less than like a guy on the crew that's kind of learned everything and maybe become stagnant in a position or has gotten too cocky, that they're the paver operator
Mm,
now and they've been running the paver for a couple of years and all of a sudden they think that's all they've got to do. They don't have to contribute to, do the other things on the team anymore because I'm the paver operator now. And it's like, well, did the did the foreman allow that ego to happen with that operator? Where was his coaching? Where was his leadership? Where was his communication? And I think when foremen fail, I think unless it's something they've specifically done or they've just become uncoachable and unapproachable, then it falls on the person above them. You know,
Absolutely.
people don't fail, leaders fail, man.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's just it's a really interesting situation that you notice specifically after a year or two, and it makes me wonder, several different factors. Is this person maybe not a leader? Could the industry, could the job just be getting to them? Just discovering all of this is something that you're good at. So don't beat yourself too too hard on that,
well,
because there's
right.
and the other underlying factor in all this that we have not mentioned is the worker supply. You
That's
gotta,
right. Yeah.
if you can't just because my
Can't
thought
create a
was like,
labor
okay, so what
force.
what happens next after this? What would you have done differently after this year or two? And you said maybe not go as harsh on the dictator style, but on the other side of that is, what next? Not just what to do differently next time, but what kind of is
Right.
next for
Yeah.
that kind of situation?
Yeah. And
Be-
and what,
because the
what
backup's
did
not there
maybe
sometimes.
that's right. And look, you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with human nature. Like
Mhm.
at some point, like people are who they are, right? And
Mhm.
it's our job as leaders to figure that out. And so if we can look ourselves in the mirror as leaders and say, I've done every single thing in my power to help this person succeed, and it's just not happening.
Yeah,
Then you can say, I've done everything I can. And
sure.
when I'm sitting here, and look, it's hard to say because that was then, this is now, hindsight's always 2020. I could probably sit here today and said, there's two foremen specifically that I can think of, and both of them very well from the old company. Um, Two great younger guys that really had a lot of charisma and opportunity, and thought they had what I thought they had what it took. And I can look back now and say, did I do everything in my power? I can probably say probably not.
Mhm.
But maybe in that moment, maybe I did do everything I knew to do to try to be a good leader
Yeah, you're
for
going
them.
through the season too. You're
That's right. Yeah.
absolutely out
And
there,
we're going
especially
through,
in
and
some
I'm,
points you're out there too. Yeah.
the owner's always the one with the highest amount of stress. And then after
Mhm.
that's, mid management and the foreman. So they're dealing with their own, pressures as well. So
Yeah.
it's,
Then
it's all hypothetical. It's all hindsight 2020, but and I think that's why as leaders, whether you're the owner or just a leader, like you always have to be evolving. You always have to get better as a leader so you can stay ahead of the people underneath of you
sure.
because they are going to get stagnant. They are going to get complacent. They are going to get comfortable. Their egos are going to get involved. Things are going to, they're going to push the rules a little bit. They're going to, just the little things to try and manipulate the seniority or the tenure that they've gained just because that's human nature, man. Like it
Sure.
just is. Like,
Sure. And for better or worse, the sense of entitlement that comes with experience,
yes,
specifically within a role.
absolutely.
Well, I
Absolutely.
I do have one last question here that I kind of thought was a different way to approach things, but whether it be as an actual foreman or as an owner dealing with a foreman, and going back to these stories and everything, was there something that you might be able to prevent someone else from doing, something that you learned the hard way that maybe someone else, hopefully you can prevent someone else from going through?
Man, I've learned a lot of things the hard way. Maybe that's just my personality style or my stubbornness or my procrastination,
I
all
can give
these
I can give you a frame of reference
all
because
these isms I have within inside of me, make me learn a lot of things the hard way, Phil.
fair enough,
If
fair
you've got
enough.
a reference, man, I'll
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, I was just thinking when you were saying, oh, come on, Phil, where was it? Um Let's see. Learn things the hard way. We were talking. We're gonna figure it out. All right. Well, it slipped. It
it
happens. The
slipped.
Friday thing again.
The Friday
Um,
thing.
it's
It's
gonna
pivotable.
it'll drive you nuts, especially when you're the host trying to be guiding the conversation and you're like, well, this is the last thing that we have on
Yeah.
our list, and I really want to get it in there.
Yeah.
But I remember it was you had said that um you're a leader that leads with his heart. You're a very empathetic person and you want to give people chances.
Your
Maybe
fault.
maybe a little too early just because, or maybe more chances than they deserve or anything like that. So earlier when you were talking about being the dictator side of things, and that it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that person who, especially if options are a little bit thin, and someone's been a hard foreman to deal with, or something like that. Is there anything that you can look back on that situation where you maybe wish you'd done something a little bit differently?
Man, I'm glad you brought this up because it's got me thinking about how I kind of used to do things and how I more so do things now. And maybe it's maturity, maybe it's the the recovery program I work, or, maybe it's the things that have happened, experiences that have happened in my life. I don't know, but um, I think I am a very empathetic person, but I think a lot of the things I allowed and ultimately tolerated to some extent, especially earlier on in my career, was because I didn't want to have the hard conversation.
Hmm.
It wasn't necessarily that I'm just trying to give chances. It was like, is it really that big of a deal? Do we really need to address it? Do I want to rock the boat? We got $100,000 of work to do next week, and if I let this guy go, can that you kind of operating out of fear of like, if I let this guy go or have a hard conversation, he quits. Now can we even go to work next week? But I always found that, by the way, when you do let go of people that do need to be let go of and part ways with people that ultimately have become cancerous within the organization, even if you don't have enough people, so you think to go to work the next day or the next week, even if you lose a couple guys, it's remarkable to see the resiliency and the folks that are still there come together and go knock that stuff out of the park anyways. Like
Sure.
those are some of the coolest things I've ever witnessed is we're a 7-man crew and let's say and we've done it like we're letting go or we're suspending our two best guys next week and the crew just come together and go, we don't miss a beat and probably even
Sure.
do it better than we would have done it with those two guys. It just goes to prove that attitude's everything, culture's everything. A good team is everything, and you can't have any of that stuff without a good leader. And so my advice would, like I said maybe some of that stuff I put off or was empathetic because I personally didn't want to have a hard conversation or didn't want to rock the boat or hurt somebody's feelings. It goes back to just letting that barrier down too, and just finding a way, find a way to have a conversation. Because I would say most of the time during or at least after that conversation's had, you're each going to have a pretty good idea. Owner, do I still want this person to be a part of the company? And the person's probably going to have, if you've been honest with them and say, really laid it out there to them, they're going to know whether they want to be there or not. So just, and that's easier said than done. Like tough conversations are easier said than done, but man, the back end of those are so powerful, and the things you find out in between can be so powerful and eye opening. You're like, oh my God, I had no idea this was the reason why that you were acting this way, or why you hadn't been showing interest, or you become disengaged, or they're probably may point out some flaws of mine that they have seen or noticed or would like to me and be like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was doing that. Yeah, I mean, you just never know.
Yeah, mutual
Have the
opportunity to grow.
conversations.
Yeah, in
Yeah,
some situations. Yeah.
yeah. So it's um,
Yeah,
you
I
almost just tapping into the, even though it is a business uh and it's meant to be professional and it's meant to be has to be organized policies, procedures, standards, like we said, like there's still a human element involved. It's usually the human element that needs to be addressed. Like what's going on either here or what's going on in your personal life or what's going on inside of you or what could the company be doing better like as humans, not as business or employer or as worker.
Yeah.
Like
And
that's
and the longer you wait to have those conversations, the harder it's going to get, and the more those conversations build up behind your back. And
absolutely,
when you
dude.
talked
Yeah,
about that the cancerous aspect of things, yeah, when people are suspended, um, especially for uh, not performance based, but for activities that are detrimental to the attitudes of people on team, that person's going to work harder and real soon if they think if they think that it might be a better team without that person, even though that they know they have to work harder, if they don't have to deal with that person anymore, they'll work harder. So, I
absolutely.
thought that was a really good observation about just cutting it off, not letting it build up, and having that conversation. As soon as you
Yeah.
can, as soon as you feel like it's a valid one to have.
Yeah, I mean we've got a guy right now that we've been kind of rotating the bottom two positions of our new crew and just trying out some new folks the last couple weeks. I guess we got we brought one back into the fold this week actually from the other business that's been out of the industry for a couple years and our and so it's he's kind of another guy that was on the crew had kind of stepped up for a couple weeks while we were trying to figure some things out, and we brought someone in. And I won't say that this other guy got demoted by any means because he's been killing it. He actually just got a raise a couple weeks back, but he's just kind of shifted positions again. I made I wouldn't say he's been off the last couple days, but he just seemed a little down. So and instead of me saying, "Oh, work harder, like change your attitude, like what's going on?" Like I took 3 minutes while I was loading the paver yesterday, and he was over there helping me chain it down. I just said, "Hey, you okay, man? Like is everything good?" I said, I just want you to know that anytime you want to grab a rake and still rake and because I said you were doing a great job learning like you'd only been raking for a couple weeks and you really were coming along strong, dude. Like I said, anytime you want to rake, grab a rake. Like we haven't demoted you back to a shovel by any means. I said we're just trying to figure out all the pieces here and get this thing as smooth as possible. And just I don't it was a 1 minute conversation, but it's like if I don't say that he might, and he, by the way, he hadn't, at least what he told me was he hadn't taken any offense to it at all, and he was fine, and happy to be doing what he was doing, and maybe was, maybe what, maybe he didn't want to tell me. Yeah, that pissed me off.
Sure.
Like I was enjoying raking, and now I'm shoveling again. So
You're
but I
still
just
boss
wanted him
man.
to
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that I was mindful of it,
Yeah.
and I think those things help, man. So
I, I I imagine it helps both you all sleep a little bit better in the weekend.
it does because
Even if there was 1% of him that was like, this sucks, like, is this going to work out or anything? It has to help those feelings a little bit
he's
and
been
make
rock
Monday a little bit
solid
better.
all season so far, and
Yeah.
he's got a great attitude. I mean, the dude's from Scotland. Like he has we have a blast with him. He's a joy to work with, and is like, man, like I don't want to see his attitude. Like I just wanted to check in it. I just want to check it. He could have stuff going on at home. You
Yeah.
know, he
Sure.
could. Who
Yep.
knows? Just check in
Absolutely.
with your folks. Check in with your team on a human level.
Yeah. Well,
A lot of,
go ahead, please.
No, I'm just saying a lot of times it's there. It has nothing to do with work or the
Yep.
fact that he's shoveling instead of raking or maybe
Yeah,
he's sick
if
and
someone
maybe
can be
he's
honest with you in that type of situation, usually it'll come out and you can tell it's a relief, and usually it has nothing to do with what you think it is. At least if it's not super apparent or something that
right,
happened in front of
right.
everyone or something. So
Absolutely, man.
yeah, that communication is I don't know, perhaps the best part about business and the biggest part of business. But
I
as
think
far
so.
as the foreman aspect of things, was there anything that we didn't get to touch on today, or a point that you didn't get to about either being a foreman or dealing with a foreman?
Man, I don't know. We talked about a lot.
We did.
And it
Feel like we could probably do a second follow-up episode on it right now.
I mean,
But
look, a bit like I started with this and I can't stress the importance of this. along from my philosophies on leadership style and interaction and communication. Like safety is the biggest one. Because look, we deal with 80,000 pound dump trucks. We deal with 30,000 pound pieces of machinery. I mean, people die in this industry. I don't know on a daily basis, but I mean, it's stuff happens out there. So I mean, probably the biggest role and probably the number one responsibility for a foreman is safety and making sure that your team is safe and you're not putting them in any bad situations. I mean, all the
Absolutely.
other stuff, if you can get that, I mean, all the other stuff you usually can figure out. We just talked about how we figure those things out, but you can't figure
Absolutely.
out anything if your guy gets crushed between a truck and a paver. That's you got a phone call to make to the coroner and to somebody's family, and
Yeah.
that's awful. So
Yeah,
yeah,
let's keep everyone safe out there, and yeah, let's not
yeah,
keep any foremen around that aren't keeping people safe.
yeah,
It
yeah,
it is easy to get caught up in, especially when you're feeling behind schedule. You
absolutely,
have
man.
quotas to
Yeah,
make. Things are going wrong. It feels like the day's spiraling. But even throughout this conversation, we didn't highlight that you highlighted it first and at the end, which is great. We're getting it in there, the safety warning,
yeah,
but that
yeah,
is the paramount job. And
yeah.
yeah. If there's any other questions that you all have about the foreman role specifically, feel free to reach out on the messages. Feel free to reach out on the comments or on YouTube or on Instagram at Pave It Forward LLC. We also have paveitforwardllc.com where we'll be coming out with more resources. We're going to be moving the podcast over to there soon within the next couple of weeks there so we can provide more in-depth resources. The episode description boxes on podcast hosts and YouTube doesn't just do it justice sometimes. So here in the near future, we'll have more resource. We will, Kevin, we're gonna make it here soon. We will have more resources for you. But anyways, for now, Kevin, are there any last thoughts for the people?
No, man, just look, it gets hot every year, but this one with safety. We're talking about the foreman. Stay hydrated out there. Stay ahead of the hydration. It's we haven't broken any heat records yet, which seems surprising because uh, I mean, it happens in Kentucky at least every year. It goes from winter essentially to midsummer overnight. Just like we get about a
Absolutely.
week or two of spring and then it's 95 and humid. So just
Absolutely.
stay hydrated, man.
Absolutely. Get your coolers, get your neckties out, man. Get some shade
Yes.
every once in a while. And yeah, join us for the next episode
Get
of the
it,
Pave It
get
Forward
a straw
podcast.
hat. Those straw hats
Absolutely. And if you're
are
interested in
are
straw
game
hat
changing.
sponsorship, reach out. Pave It Forward
SA
LLC.
SA fishing.
There it is. We got you.
There it is.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on the Pave It Forward podcast. Check out our other episodes if you're wanting more. If not, we'll see you on the next episode.